Welcome everybody to the Data Defender Forum episode number 3. I am Sid Michaelash and I will be your host for today. So in this episode, we will discuss about personal data exchange between Europe and the US and how European company may not be able to use American internet services in the near future. So in 2020, Europe canceled the Privacy Shield agreement for failing to protect European citizen personal data. Indeed, US government agencies, such as the NSA and other three-letter agencies, had very easy access to this data. And so to address that, a new agreement, the Data Privacy Framework, was put in place. But companies following this framework have faced confusion, reported higher compliance costs, while this new agreement isn't really addressing the issues for which the Privacy Shield was cancelled. And because there is no way for US companies to guarantee that European citizen data won't be handed out to government institutions, it is possible that Europe will eventually deny its company from using American internet services. The implication would be obviously massive, and how would this even work? And so in today's episode, we are joined by Fabian Peter, who actually tried this for his own business and will share with us how it went. Fabian is a tech founder from Germany. He runs several businesses in the space of cloud solution, software development, and IT infrastructure with a focus on microservices and Kubernetes architectures. Fabian, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me here. I'm very excited.
Thank you for coming. And so, I got to see, learn about you and what you tried through a post on LinkedIn where you reacted to a blog post of DHH, and you said that you tried to basically stop using US internet-based services for your company. So can you share with us, why did you decide to do that?
I'm not an apologetic in these terms, but I share your opinion that in a few years to come, probably European offices and data regulation offices will in some way make it very hard for European companies to use foreign software. And by foreign, I actually mean US software, because I've never had this debate with Iraq or Israel, but it's always only the US. It's just like a gut feeling, given that in the past few years, these legal frameworks emerged, got replaced, emerged again, and replaced again. And with every iteration of that process, there's, for one more, fear that we might lose this software in the future. So there's a certain movement that says we strive for sovereignty, so we are not lost in the end. And the second thing is that there are very hard decisions definitely made in Germany from courts that simply deny access to certain public institutions to Microsoft services or Google services. So in Baden-Württemberg, I believe there has been a ruling that disallowed schools to use Microsoft services for collaboration, based on the assumption that the data cannot be definitively secured or I don't know, locked away from external access, so to say. And I personally, since I'm a tech founder, I just think about the future in terms of if this hits us, what will be the implications? As you mentioned, it would be very, very hard for European markets to be locked out of that software ecosystem, because everything we do in Germany is running on Excel, and these days on Azure Active Directory online and stuff like that. And I'm just asking myself, do I want my company to be in that position, back against the wall in a few years, and then I have to move like all my services to alternatives that might not be established well enough, or that I do not have the skills to actually use, because, you need training and like muscle memory, even with your technology. Otherwise, it's just a piece of technology. If you can't put it to use, which takes time, it doesn't help you. So I'm just trying to look ahead and think about my actual problems in terms of what tech do I need to use, what problems do I need to solve, and can I replace my usual go-to service like Microsoft MS 365 with something else. It's not on US, US, that's not controlled by US entities, that has no looming conflict in legal terms in the future. And on the other hand, of course, I'm a huge opponent of walled gardens and logins. So of course, I'm looking for alternatives. But the main premise is, in a few years to come, I guess it will be very hard for us to justify why are you using a service that doesn't guarantee you data sovereignty and doesn't respect our GDPR. And I don't want to move fast in 5 years. I prefer to move slow now, make good decisions. And on the other hand, our whole business is built up on the premise that our customers do the same thing. So we are trying to provide these services to them on European hardware, open source, licensed, proprietary, doesn't matter. It's just where's the data located. And yeah, most of the time that means not in Azure and not in Google and not in AWS.
Right. I think multiple interesting things. That indeed, like a bunch of institutions are already denied from using, American services, and it's not. Sometimes the data is in Europe physically, but it's still under the governance of American companies, and so, if one of the government agency in the US is requesting the data, they have no choice but to agree. And so we see this emergence of the data needs to remain local, physically speaking, but obviously they can be transferred immediately in the US. So it's I'm kind of surprised about countries thinking that having the data located physically in data center in their country will change anything. It's kind of like, right? Maybe it's lawmakers who don't really understand how tech is working, or maybe it's a first step towards this. But I find it a bit useless to be honest. I think it makes a lot of sense for you to do that because, as you said, applying it to your own business, you can then provide this for your customers who might need it in the near future or want to be ready for it. And depending on the type of industries that your customer are in, it might be earlier or already happening, or maybe sooner or later. So so how so you came up with this analysis of the situation. What was your strategy to achieve that? How did you go about it?
Slowly. So that's one thing. Meaning I didn't expect to just cut out any US service and then have an immediate replacement that fulfills all my needs. So we started slow. We started getting rid of stuff like Jira, Adobe, so things that do not have that huge impact in my daily communication or process management in the company. Then we moved away from pretty much MS Teams. We used that as a chat a few years ago. We moved towards Mattermost self-hosted, which was easy. And more and more with each service that we, let's say, conquered, with each application, SaaS service, it doesn't matter if it's US or anything else. We started migrating everything to self-hosted and on-prem stuff. So I never need to have a discussion on where is my data located with anyone because it's on my hardware on premises. And after a while, we decided to go with the harder cases, which is in my case the hardest thing to migrate away from Microsoft and friends is email. So it took us a year and a half, and we are a small company, to successfully move our mails out of MS 365 into a German mail provider. So we didn't decide to make that on our own because there's this whole reputational thingy with emails, and just booting up a VPS and sending emails doesn't get you anywhere. So we decided to move to a German entity. It's called mailbox.org. And now we're pretty much in the progress of moving away from them to a self-hosted solution. So just to give you an idea, we planned actually 3 to 4 years to just move our email communication to be sure we have a fail-safe system that's pretty much always available. It must have a good reputation, so we can't lose emails in transit, stuff like that.
So let's say like some of our audience members want to get started doing this. Like what are the services that were super easy to migrate and they could start moving?
The other thing that we moved in very, very early in the beginning was authentication. Everything else pretty much builds up on this. So now we're using Nextcloud instead of Google Drive, and we authenticate Nextcloud with our central IDP, and you build that up, and all our chats and whatever we use is connected to that. So for everyone who wants to start, I would start with chat solutions because they're easy, and I would start with owning your identity management with tools like Keycloak, or we're using Authentic in specific, but there's I don't know, also Citadel and stuff like that. Just to be able to migrate, for example, away from Azure App Active Directory, you can import those in your new thingy, synchronize that, and then have the new IDP be your connection interface and authentication.
Right.
And that was for us to start, actually.
It makes sense to start with that because, as you said, everything plugs into it. One of the risks for European companies is not that much. I mean, like there is one issue where like there is a concern of US agencies having access to European citizen data, personal data. And on the other flip of the coin for European companies, like Europe suddenly deciding that, hey, like, okay, like you cannot use this software anymore. And that could be a huge blow to their business. And so I think, it's two-sided thing, but I think for European companies, they should almost be more worried about, hey, Europe deciding that, hey, this is not okay to do anymore. And we certainly need new model, new ways to build and deliver software. One of the concepts we've discussed in former episode of the Data Defender Forum is private SaaS. I don't know if you've heard about this, Fabian, but it's this concept where basically there is a segregation between the control plane and the data plane. And so private SaaS is you have all the advantage of a SaaS software where it's built for you, it's managed for you, it's updated for you, it's easy to use, with the advantage of, like an on-premise solution where the data is still hosted under your control, right? So you host it where you want. You can host it on the public cloud, on-premise, or wherever you want. But the key is that you have control over this data. So, like, do you think model like that, where you still have a vendor, who can specialize in building this software and make profit, and still giving the end user access to their control over the data? Do you think that could be? Is it a model that you think could be successful and solve a lot of the issues that we discussed during in this episode?
I think so. So I've actually until now never thought of that or coined it with private SaaS, but actually, yeah, it's a very good idea, and at least I'm already using services that work in that way. For example, in my home, I'm using Unify networking gear. I'm not sure if that rings a bell with you.
Yeah, it's very popular in the US.
They have a cloud control plane where you can hook up your devices, and they then make sure that they are updated and stuff like that, that you have access from the outside if you want. But my data is here. So everything that will be collected in terms of metrics or security footage and stuff like that is in my home. I can just use the SaaS layer to connect to it when I'm not at home and stuff like that. And I think that's a very smart way to deal with things, because most of the concerns are actually only about data at rest, and personal identifiable information. If you do not give access to that to the vendor, and you have a smart API or contract between your systems, then yeah, That seems to be a very good solutions. And I don't know, current modern tooling like Kubernetes pretty much endorses
Right.
this way of operating, actually.
Yeah, that's very true. And while it was hard to have data on Kubernetes used to be not something stable. Now it's the technology has matured, and it's data on Kubernetes is now saying everybody's doing it. So that's I think you're right. Like, and you, in your bio you say you are specialized in microservices and Kubernetes architecture. I agree. Like it's this thing. I mean, this initially was started by Google as a way to counter Amazon lead in cloud infrastructure, and they are trying to find a way to counter that. And the beauty of Kubernetes is that you can run it everywhere, including in Google Cloud. So I think they managed to do something, and they did this with open source, which is quite cool. But getting back to our topic, like how likely do you think it's possible for Europe to actually pass a law that would say, hey, you cannot use these services?
I don't think that there will be a day where the European courts will just disallow use of whatever comes from the US. I think it will be more subtle. I also think it will be more regional federal governments or state governments or jurisdictions that will bring forward decisions along those lines, because they, I don't know, try to cover their ass, or they have a very opinionated data security officer in their ranks. I don't know. So it will be specifically single cases that emerge to a bigger picture, where people then come to the impression that, hey, this is disallowed, so we cannot use this anymore. And I think this is also a result of how market forces work. We have one daemon and now we get another, and try to switch. We try to get away from the one daemon with a new one.
Europe could try to strike a deal and kind of get the US to agree that their government agency cannot access the data so easily. Do you think it's possible? Do you think like the law can get there, or do you think the only way to guarantee that is to enforce it with technology, which is, hey, I have the data under my control, as you said, I know it's there. There is no conversation to have. Like, do you think of a legal framework like between these two, like countries? I mean, Europe is not a country, but if these two like entity could emerge, or do you think it's not possible, and the only way to do that is through engineering?
Yeah, I think the only way to do that is engineering. Being an engineer and knowing how that all works makes it absolutely apparent that a law by itself will never hinder someone from accessing what he wants to access. Okay? And I have actually no insight in how these three-letter agencies work, how deep they are connected, how much they actually know. But if I had to assume, if I just had to guess, I would say they have access to everything they want. They just have currently no legal justification to tell everyone. And I don't think you can solve that problem technically either, because, I don't know, everything can be stolen if you try hard enough. So there's actually no way to really, really protect anything here. I think the whole debate is more about what happens if my data, my, I don't know, private medicine data gets exposed, and someone in the US, some agency knows about it, and then, I don't know, does anything bad to me. It's just a legal thing. It's very superficial, but talking about securing the data, actually, I don't think that's actually possible, Still, I think the best way to achieve this, if that's really, really concern of people, is to put it in engineering and build their own solutions. And I don't know, go forward with conventional compute, with encrypting pretty much everything at rest, in transit, whatever. Go ahead. But to be honest, I think it's mostly a superficial debate, and anyone wants to do the bad things with your data, they will find a way to do so. No law will prevent them, and probably no technology will prevent them. But But I think in terms of sovereignty, I mentioned I'm not an apologist. I'm not religious about this, but I think as a European federation, as a German country and US country, I think we should each on our own try to gain and foster skills to build things like we need them to. If we feel we are exposed too much to other people, then we should learn how to not be that exposed. But that's not what we're doing. We're just talking legal stuff and trying to prevent what-if scenarios. But we could have invested all the time in building a technical solution that means we do not need whatever they have to offer from above the ocean. But we do not do that. We do not.
So, yeah, it's like hire more software engineer, hire less lawyers. Could be the slogan. Fabian, thank you a lot for chatting with me today and sharing your experience. I think you are on Twitter, right? If people want to follow up with some question.
No, unfortunately not. I'm just LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, right? You are very active on LinkedIn.
That's true. So also thanks for having me. It was a very interesting talk to have and a very interesting perspective on the world. You know, it's not so often that people all invest time and thinking and viewing the world through these lenses, being more critic and asking questions in terms of sovereignty, security, and how can we deal with the struggles that we face with legislation. So that's very interesting. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Fabian. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.